For me, there have been two big electric car stories in 2024, two major headlines. The rise of the small EV segment and the rise of the performance EV segment. Well, what we have here is a new car that fits neatly into both. This is the Alpine A290. It's the first electric Alpine based, as you could probably tell, on the brilliant electric Renault 5. And depending on how you look at it, that either puts Alpine at a huge advantage or a massive disadvantage. Because on the one hand, what a starting point, what an amazing base for your first EV. Renault's done a lot of the heavy lifting for them. But on the other hand, some pressure, because what Alpine now has to do to justify this car's existence, for this to make any sense at all, is take one of the best new cars of the year and make it much better. Like 10 grand better. Thankfully, as it turns out, Alpine, not really into half measures. Now here's the thing about range-topping performance versions of electric cars. 9 times out of 10, they're not worth it. With a few notable exceptions, my rule of thumb is don't bother with the range-topping expensive one, because most of the time, the brand hasn't really bothered either. It's the same car with more power and some badges. The first thing we need to say about the A290 is this ain't that, which is to say Alpine have thrown the kitchen sink at the Renault 5 in order to make it what they deem appropriate for their first ever electric car in terms of the design, the handling, but also the way it feels. So what does that mean? Well, from a design standpoint, it means they've taken the Renault 5 and they've turned it up to 11. It looks like an angry little rally car, doesn't it? We've got the quad lamps across the front. That's an Alpine design staple. Notice the little crisscrosses in the headlights as well, a homage to Alpine's rally days, during which, if you were doing a rally stage, you just tape your headlights up in a little X shape so that if you did crash midway up the stage, you wouldn't leave broken glass all over the track for your fellow competitors. There you go, thoughtful. What else? Well, it's lower, it's wider, the suspension is very new, we'll talk about that in a moment. The track is 60 mil wider. That's a lot for a sub 4 meter car, which just makes it look low and mean and squat. The arches are flared. This is really cool. I love this little design motif on the back door. Surely a homage to the Renault 5 Turbo with its big gaping intakes in front of the rear fenders. And you find me a better looking back end in the automotive world. I mean, I thought the Renault 5 was incredible from the back. Its best angle, surely. This is even better because we've got the new diffuser, we've got a new wing. It's great in this color as well. And this is handy, look, because it's based on the Renault 5 and it's still front wheel drive. There's no motor back here. We still have a 326 litre boot, which is some 100 more than a similar sized electric Mini. As for the spec sheet, one glance tells you just how busy Alpine have been. The battery remains the same from the R5, likewise the heat pump and bidirectional charging as standard, but everything else has been fiddled with. That means bigger, beefier brakes and upgraded tyres. It means an entirely bespoke front suspension and heavily revised rear, plus bespoke anti-roll bars. They've even fiddled with the subframe. In the Alpine, as with the R5, there's a single motor powering the front wheels, but now it's housed in a special, bespoke aluminium cradle, improving lightness and rigidity. It's fair to say that Alpine, to quote an Aussie chap I once knew, have not come to put shoes on centipedes. Now that's a lot of fancy new componentry, but Alpine are adamant that the really special stuff isn't on the spec sheet. It's the intangibles, it's the tuning and tweaking and fettling that they've spent endless hours doing on this car to make it feel the way they want it to feel. And above all else, what Alpine wants this car to feel like is small and light. That is Alpine 101. And it does. It's certainly helped by the fact that the car is physically fairly small and light. Sub 4 meters, cars don't get much smaller than that these days, and sub 1.5 tons, it's no featherweight, but it is about the same in weight as a modern equivalent petrol hot hatchback. It doesn't have the extra mass that you often get from EVs because the battery isn't too big, because it sits on a bespoke EV platform, which I never thought about this until it was explained by an engineer yesterday. Saves weight. If you're building a platform for engines and batteries, you have to have twice as much crash protection, twice as much insulation. It adds a huge amount of extra stuff. Bespoke EVs tend to be lighter. So how do you make a fairly light car feel really light? I'll give you two examples. Number one, the steering. For me, the defining feature of a really light car is the way the nose just dives into corners when you turn the wheel. There isn't that lumbering sense of mass changing direction, it just goes. And I spoke to the engineers about this. I said, have you fitted it with a much quicker steering rack than the Renault 5? They said, nope, same steering. We've given it a bit more weight, but what you're feeling there is our fancy new front suspension, is the upgraded tyres. And it just feels so nimble, so agile, the way it darts into corners. Oh, it's very satisfying. But the other area where they've created this sensation of lightness is the suspension. This car kind of just glides over the road surface. It's much more comfortable than I expected it to be. I thought they'd make it all firm and stiff, but they said, no, we want it to be usable and comfortable. We don't want it to be a bone-shaking track car. It's for use on real roads every day. But it also gives it so much personality because it's playful. Watch this hairpin. We brake, we turn, front end dives in, and the back end goes all waggy-tailed on the way out. Sure, they could have given it 300 horsepower instead of 220. They could have given it super stiff suspension, and that would have enabled me to get it up this road a little bit quicker. But I wouldn't be having more fun. Right, quick pit stop to refuel. Not the car's mine, they've got lots of charge. It's us, we're hungry. But while we're here, stopped, let's just do a quick fly around of this interior. This is the area where I really feel like Renault did Alpine a big favour with the 5, because this interior was so good to start with. It was a standout thing about the Renault 5. And much of it is the same, so we've got the same 2-screen setup with Google software, which works. We've got the same interesting shaped piece across the dash. We've got the same bank of physical switches for the climate control, which work. Got the same button just to the left of the steering wheel, with 2 presses of which I can turn off all the annoying ADAS safety features that I don't want, like lane assist. Yes, yes. So that's all good, that's all Renault 5. But Alpine have not rested on their laurels. They have made a point of making this different from the base car. So, different materials. The Renault 5 had interesting textures. This does too, but different ones. This is all scaly. Ooh, I like it. This center console, this is bespoke for the Alpine. You've got their iconic DNR drive select buttons. No cup holder though. No cup holder. Disaster. Steering wheel, that's very Alpine, isn't it? Look, we're really leaning into the whole F1 thing here because we've got our drive mode selector. This is actually how we adjust our regen braking, but it's a rotary dial with RCH for recharge on it, which, you know, it's just a bit cooler than having paddles or doing it in a touchscreen. Speaking of novel, if we go into the infotainment system, this is really quite unique. We have something called Alpine Telemetrics, and we can see our live data if we go around a track. There's a coaching mode where it gives you kind of idiot's guide to kissing apexes and whatnot, but we also have challenges. This is straight out of an Xbox. So if I click on agility, for example, click on that one, click the thing that says I'm definitely on a closed road, which I'm not, but that's what the owners will do, so it's what we're doing. And this is a challenge of how much G-force you can pull in a sideways direction. If you can pull 0.4 Gs, you get bronze. But if you can do 0.55, you get gold. This is like having a really immature best friend sat next to you at all times going, go on, slide it around that roundabout, go on. There's efficiency challenges as well, but mostly they're about going very fast and very sideways. So that's fun. And then final thing, the seats. The seats are mega. Again, bespoke for the A290. They just hug you so nicely. And look at this Napa leather in a beautiful bluish hue. I like this. What I like less is this. Now, this is not Alpine's fault. This is a Renault decision. But where are the back seats? Why have you decided to give it a huge, for its size, boot? And then no legroom. Legroom's important. You can put shopping on back seats, you can't put kids in the boot. We've talked about this before. Seems like a strange decision to me. This is actually very painful, what I'm doing right now. This hurts, I think I'm stuck. Help, George? So it feels smaller and lighter than it actually is. We've established that. What else are we noticing? Well, I think it feels faster than it actually is. So many modern cars have really lost the sensation of speed. They make going very quickly feel very ordinary. And in a driver's car, you want the opposite of that. You want normal speed to feel exciting. And it kind of does in the Alpine, partly because it's relatively small. I'm sitting quite low to the ground. That helps with the sensation of speed. But I think this sound is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that department as well. Having that aural accompaniment to your inputs just gives it some atmosphere, gives you some context for what you're doing. And let's talk about this sound, because they've spent a lot of time on it. Alpine claims that they've actually recorded the genuine noises coming from the motor and then put them through a kind of, low frequency compressor, jazzed it up a bit, and this is the result. And it sounds, for want of a better word, real. It's not pretending to be a petrol engine. It sounds like what you sort of imagine the mechanical sounds of an EV would be. It's very satisfying. There's a push to pass button, which if I press it, it basically just floors the accelerator for me. You don't get bonus power. But it's kind of novel. It's making me giggle. That's a good sign. So most cars that I've seen with a kind of push to pass function, you press it and then you get extra power for 15 seconds and it doesn't really do anything for me. This actually kind of just floors the car for you. Fun graphics appear on the screen. It's entertaining. Another slightly more clever, slightly more complicated thing they've achieved is absolute seamlessness in the transition from the regen brakes to the discs. So if I slam the brakes now, very progressive, much like the throttle, you have to press either pedal quite hard for a lot to happen. You really modulate what you do. But somewhere along the travel of that brake pedal, the regen brakes stop and the discs activate, and you can't tell where it is. That's a very, very good thing as far as driver enjoyment. I like how unspiky the throttle is as well. You'd think there'd be this temptation to make it as angry and instant as possible, the torque delivery. But on the contrary, they've decided to do the opposite. They want you to have that modulation. They want you to control how much power you apply. And it also means to get a move on, you've really got to bury your foot, which again, sense of speed. I have to say, I'm a fan. I mean, I'm biased. I love small cars. I love performance cars. I love small performance cars more than just about anything. This is a really well put together one. I mean, it has this wonderful starting point in the Renault 5. Stylish, desirable, already good to drive. Not perfect. I wish there was more room in the back seats. I don't know why they gave it a huge boot and then really small back seats. I'd have had it the other way around personally. I find the front a little bit cramped as well. I've not been able to get quite the driving position I would want. But these are small gripes in what is a very special car. And Alpine has, I think, done a sufficiently good job of adding that extra bit more to justify this car's existence over the Renault 5. Some car purists might get a bit down about the fact that performance brands like Alpine are switching their attention to electric. They might think, well, can't we just have those brands go last, let them continue making the pure petrol sport stuff until the bitter end? I don't know, I quite like having the best and the brightest in the department of fun and handling applying themselves to making electric cars fun sooner rather than later, because it means we don't have to wait anymore to get cars like this, electric cars that are genuinely fun to drive. We'll need to drive it on some bumpy British B roads before giving the final verdict. These roads have been buttery smooth and very flattering, but for the time being, I'm pretty charmed. So there we have it, the Alpine A290, one of the most special new cars of the year, now more special. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have been, thanks for watching.